No one knew who he was, where he came from, or how he got there. All that was known was that he was from a forgotten place called Tishbe in Gilead, a dry land far from palaces, where dust was more common than bread. His name? Elijah, a man who seemed to have come out of the desert with eyes full of fire and a heart inflamed by a certainty. God had spoken to him. He was not a priest. He did not come from a noble family. He had no titles. He just appeared without warning in front of the most wicked king Israel had ever had, Ahab. The king, sitting on his throne, surrounded by gold, guards, and flatterers, could hardly imagine that this stranger in worn clothes and with a steady gaze was about to turn his life upside down. Elijah did not bow, did not ask permission, nor mince words. With a firm voice and faith embedded in his chest, he uttered the sentence like a bolt of lightning. "As surely as the Lord lives, there will be no dew or rain in the next few years except at my word." The entire palace fell silent. Who was this man to say such a thing? A mere peasant, a madman. But time passed, and the rain stopped. The fields began to dry up, the rivers dwindled, and the people grew thirsty. And the king, who had laughed at first, now clenched his fists in anger. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting Bible stories and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If this content touches your heart and you want to support us, feel free to click on the Thanks a Lot button. All help is welcome and makes a big difference. Elijah, by God's command, disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. He vanished like the wind that no longer blew. God took him to a hidden place, far from the eyes of the soldiers, near a stream that still flowed timidly between the rocks. There, where no one would find him, the unexpected happened. The ravens, unclean birds according to the law, began to bring him food every day, morning and night. But over time, the stream began to disappear. First, there was just a trickle of water, then only wet stones, until the ground cracked. The earth swallowed the last drop. Elijah looked around and saw nothing but silence and heat. The place where God had hidden him now seemed abandoned, even by the winds. But he did not complain. He did not run away. He waited. That was when God spoke again. The order was direct. "Go to Zarephath, a town near Sidon. There is a widow there who will take care of you." Elijah got up and followed the dusty road without asking any questions. Zarephath was outside Israel, in a region where the people worshipped other gods. It was precisely there, in the territory of Baal, the same God challenged by Elijah, that God decided to act. When he reached the entrance to the city, he saw a woman gathering sticks. She was tired, her skin marked by hunger, her eyes sunken with despair. Elijah called to her, "Give me a little water, please." As she went to fetch it, he added, "And bring a piece of bread, too." The woman stopped. She looked at him as if holding back tears. "I swear by the Lord your God that I have nothing but a handful of flour and a little oil. I was going to make the last piece of bread for myself and my son. After that, we just wait for death." Elijah took a deep breath. "First make a small cake for me, then make some for yourselves. For the Lord has promised that the flour in the pot will not run out, and the oil in the jar will not dry up, until the day he sends rain again upon the earth." She stood there in silence. Something inside her, perhaps hunger, perhaps faith, overcame her fear, and she obeyed. The days passed, and the promise was fulfilled. Every time the woman put her hand in the pot, the flour was still there. And the oil, it never ran out. It seemed like magic, but it was a miracle. Elijah ate with them, and for a while in that little house, hunger lost the war. But the peace was short-lived. On an ordinary day, the widow's son fell ill. A slight cold turned into a high fever. Then silence. The boy stopped breathing. She, ran to Elijah with her son's body in her arms and her heart full of pain. "Did you come here just to bring my guilt to light and kill my son?" she cried between tears and anger. Elijah was shocked. He took the boy and went up to the room where he slept. He laid the body on the bed and closed the door. The silence was heavy. Up there, the prophet who spoke with God felt small. He knelt down, bowed his head, and cried out loudly, "Lord my God, will evil strike even this woman who took me in? Will you take her son too?" He lay down on the boy's body 3 times as if trying to warm his life with his own soul. He cried out once more, "Lord, please give this child his life back." And the impossible happened. The boy's chest filled with air. His eyes slowly opened. Elijah took him in his arms and slowly descended the stairs. As he handed the child to his mother, he simply said, "Look, your son is alive." She said nothing at first. She just looked at her son, then at Elijah, and let her tears speak for her. 3 years had passed since that first meeting between Elijah and King Ahab. The earth was cracked, animals were dying, the people begged for a drop of water, and the gods of wood and stone remained silent. It was in this setting that God spoke to Elijah once again. "Go, show yourself to Ahab. I will send the rain." And so he went. When he found the king, Elijah got straight to the point. He said that Israel's problem was not the drought, but idolatry. He proposed a challenge, a meeting on Mount Carmel. It would not be in secret, but before all the people. A confrontation between Elijah, alone, and the 450 prophets of Baal, plus the 400 of Asherah. The stage was set. At the top of the mountain, Elijah raised his voice. "How long will you stay on the fence? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him." No one answered. An uncomfortable silence fell. The challenge was simple. 2 altars. 2 oxen, no fire. Whoever responded with fire from heaven would be the true God. The prophets of Baal began. They shouted, they danced, they cut themselves with knives. Time passed, blood flowed, and nothing happened. Elijah watched and couldn't resist the irony. "Shout louder, maybe he's asleep or traveling." When his turn came, Elijah called the people to him. He repaired the broken altar. He took 12 stones, 1 for each tribe of Israel. He dug a trench around it. He placed the ox on top of the wood and ordered water to be poured on it. 3 times. So much water that it flowed around the altar. Everything was soaked. Then Elijah prayed, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, show today that you are God." Before he finished, the sky split open. Fire came down with force and consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the water, everything. The people fell face down on the ground. "The Lord is God! The Lord is God!" they shouted. But victory was not the end, because the sky was still dry. And Elijah had one last prayer to say before the rain would return. The fire still burned in their memories when Elijah climbed alone to the top of Mount Carmel. There was no crowd now, no shouting, no spectacle. Just him, the sky still closed, and God's promise beating like a drum in his chest. "I will send rain." Elijah knelt down. He put his face between his knees, as if hiding from the world to hear the sky better. He called his servant and said, "Go up higher and look toward the sea. See if there are any clouds." The young man went. He returned. Shortly after, his voice dry. "Nothing!" Elijah didn't even move. "Go again. Twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times." Each time he returned, the silence grew louder. It seemed as if the sky was mocking him. But Elijah did not stop. He continued praying. He continued waiting. Until, on the 7th time, the young man returned running, his eyes wide. There is a cloud, small, the size of a man's hand, coming from the sea. It was small, almost nothing, but for Elijah it was everything. He stood up as if waking from a dream. He sent a message to the king, "Come down from the mountain and go home before the rain catches you on the way." The sky, which until then had been light grey, began to darken. A strong wind suddenly blew, as if the air had been holding its breath for years. Soon the first drops fell, and then the rain came down hard, washing away the dust, soaking the earth, breaking the silence that had reigned for so long. The king got into his chariot and hurried away, but Elijah ran. Yes, he ran. The Bible says that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and the prophet ran faster than the king's horses until he reached the entrance to Jezreel. The news reached the palace faster than the rain. Jezebel heard every detail: the prophets of Baal dead, the people prostrate before the God of Elijah, the fire from heaven, the crowd shouting the name of the Lord. She wasted no time. She sent a message directly to the prophet. "May the gods punish me if tomorrow, at this time, you are still alive." Elijah, the same man who had faced a king, challenged hundreds of prophets, and prayed until the heavens opened, felt fear chill his spine. He ran. Not like before, with the Spirit propelling him. He ran away from her, away from everything. He went to Beersheba, left his servant there, and continued alone through the desert. He walked all day under the sun, his feet dragging in the sand, until he could no longer go on. He sat down under a dry bush and murmured what no one expected to hear. "Enough, Lord, take my life. I'm no better than my parents." There, under that crooked tree, the prophet who once called down fire from heaven now just wanted to sleep and disappear. But God did not ignore his weariness. While Elijah slept, an angel came slowly. He touched his shoulder and said, "Get up and eat." Next to him was bread baked on hot coals and a bowl of water. Elijah ate, drank, and slept again. For the second time the angel returned. "Get up and eat, because the journey will be long." With a weak body and a heavy heart, Elijah got up, and he walked 40 days and 40 nights through the desert until he reached a place steeped in history, Mount Horeb, the same place where God spoke to Moses. There, tired of running, Elijah entered a cave, and he stayed, waiting in silence. The cave was cold and dark, perfect for someone who wanted to disappear from the world. Elijah curled up inside as if he wanted to turn into a rock and forget he existed. Slow steps, short breaths, and in the silence of that hiding place, God asked, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elias's voice came out heavy, like an outburst that had been stuck inside him for a long time. "I have served you zealously, Lord, but they have destroyed your altars, killed your prophets, and I am the only one left. And now they want to take my life too." God then called him out. He said he was going to pass by right in front of him. Elijah came out of the cave, crouched at the entrance, and waited. Suddenly, a strong wind came, so violent that it split the rocks. But God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake shook everything. The ground trembled as if the mountain were about to fall. But God was not in the earthquake either. Then came the fire, fierce and frightening. But God was not there either. Finally, there was a gentle sound, a whisper, so soft that it seemed almost nothing, and that's when Elijah covered his face with his cloak. God was in that silence that speaks louder than 1,000 thunderclaps. And again, the question, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The answer was the same. The pain was still the same, but something in the air had changed. God then showed Elijah that he was not alone. There were 7,000 in Israel who had not bowed down to Baal, 7,000 faithful hearts that Elijah did not know, but that God had kept. What's more, God gave him a new mission. Among the names he was to anoint, one caught his attention: Elisha. Elijah descended the mountain with firmer steps. Sadness still lingered in some corner of his heart, but now he had a direction. God had sent him to anoint kings, change destinies, and find Elisha. He was easy to find. Elisha was in the field, plowing the land with 12 yoke of oxen, a simple, sweaty life of one who knew the weight of the earth in his hands. Elijah said nothing. He just came up behind him, took off his cloak, the cloak that had been with him from the beginning, and threw it over Elisha's shoulders. In that gesture, there was no ceremony, no explanation. But Elisha understood everything. He stopped. He left the oxen. He ran after the prophet. "Let me just say goodbye to my family and I'll follow you." Elijah replied in his usual dry manner, "Do as you wish." But Elisha didn't just say goodbye. He killed the oxen, broke the yoke, and used the wood to make a fire. He roasted the meat and offered it as a farewell gift. He burned his past so he would have nowhere to return to. And so he began to follow Elijah as a servant, an apprentice, and as the heir to a mission whose magnitude he did not yet know. The two began to walk together. From city to city, Elisha observed, learned, carried the weight of Elijah's silence and the strength of his faith. Not many could follow the prophet without getting lost, but Elisha stayed, always one step behind, but always present. The days passed, and little by little, the sky seemed to announce that something big was about to happen. The sons of the prophets murmured among themselves, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take Elijah today?" Elisha only replied, "I know. Be quiet." Something was in the air. Elijah knew it. Elisha knew it too. And then the day came. The last day. The final walk in which the man who spoke with thunder would be taken away, not by death, but by something that heaven was preparing with fire and wind. Even with the end approaching, Elijah did not slow down. There were still kings to be confronted and sins to be exposed. One of them was Ahaziah, son of Ahab, who followed in his parents' crooked ways, worshipping idols, despising God, making rotten alliances. One day Ahaziah fell from the top of his room and was injured. Instead of seeking the Lord, he sent messengers to consult Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, to find out if he would recover. But the answer came before they got there. Elijah intercepted them on the way. He appeared out of nowhere, as was to be expected. "Tell the king, is there no God in Israel? Why are you going to consult Baal-zebub? Because of this, he will not get up from the bed where he is. He will die." The message fell like a stone in the palace. Ahaziah, angry, sent soldiers to arrest Elijah, a captain with 50 men. When they approached, Elijah did not even move. He just looked and said, "If I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you." And fire came from heaven again. The king sent another group. Same result. Only on the third attempt, when the captain knelt down and begged for mercy, did Elijah go with him. He came before the king and repeated everything face to face, and Ahaziah died, just as Elijah had said. Still, none of this seemed like a grand finale. No glory, no celebration. Elijah remained silent, steadfast, his gaze increasingly distant. Something about him already seemed to belong elsewhere. Elisha followed him closely, more attentive than ever, and on that last journey, passing through Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho, every step seemed to echo something invisible, until they reached the banks of the Jordan. There Elijah took off his cloak one last time, struck the waters, and the river parted. They crossed on dry ground, and on the other side the sky was already moving, because the chariot was already on its way. On the other side of the Jordan, there was only silence and open sky. Elijah stopped. He looked at Elisha with the calmness of one who already knew what was coming. "Ask for whatever you want, before I am taken from you." Elisha didn't think twice. He looked him straight in the eye and said, "I want a double portion of your spirit." Elijah shook his head slowly. You have asked for something difficult. But if you see me when I am taken, then it will be yours." There was no time for anything else. The ground shook slightly, as if announcing something sacred, and then the sky opened up completely. A whirlwind appeared with fury, raising dust and light. From within it, a chariot of fire pulled by horses. Of fire descended at speed. The sound was like thunder mixed with a cutting wind. The flames did not burn the earth, but left everything suspended. Elisha saw it. He saw it with wet eyes and a heavy heart. Elijah was taken by the wind, enveloped in that chariot that rose straight up to the sky, without dying, without being buried. A man who had faced kings, who had defied fear, now crossed the skies before his apprentice, and the cloak fell. Elisha ran, picked up the cloak with trembling hands. He looked back at the Jordan, the same river they had crossed. Now he was alone, with the cloak in his hands and the weight of the mission on his shoulders. He struck the waters as he saw Elijah do. "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" The river opened up. The sons of the prophets, who were watching from afar, saw it and said, "The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha." And so the story continued. The cloak was passed on. The calling continued. The story of Elijah does not end in heaven. It continues here in the pages of the Bible and in the memories of those who have felt fear, who have wanted to give up, who have found themselves alone. Because Elijah, as great as he was made of the same clay as the rest of us. He was a man of flesh and blood. He heard God, yes, but he also had days when he wanted to disappear. He cried, he ran away, he questioned, he sat under a tree and said, "Enough." And even so, God chose him. God sustained him. God heard him in the desert, fed him warm bread at dawn, guided him to the cave, called him in a whisper. He did not come with shouting or spectacle, but with presence. Elijah discovered that he did not need to be strong all the time, that God's power is often revealed in silence, in waiting, in not yet. His life also shows that you don't have to be many to make a difference. Elijah faced crowds alone. He stood before a king. He delivered a harsh message to those who only wanted to hear pleasant words. He was in the minority, but he was on the right side. Because when God is with someone, even one against 450 is a sure victory. And perhaps the strongest lesson lies in the cloak that fell. Elijah was gone, but his mission was not. What God began with him continued with Elisha and continues with all those who today still have the courage to carry this calling. The cloak passes. The voice of God continues to echo. So if today you feel like you're in the desert, if it seems like the fight is yours alone, if fear screams louder than faith, remember Elijah. God didn't give up on him, and he won't give up on you. Because the same fire that fell on Carmel, the same bread that fed him in the desert, the same whisper that calmed his heart, are still alive and waiting for the